All right, guys, the first type of sentence that we're going to talk about is a simple sentence. So a simple sentence just basically means that it is comprised of one independent clause. It expresses one complete thought. So an example of this would be, my ice cream fell on the ground. So when we look at this sentence, my ice cream fell on the ground, we have an independent clause. Remember, a clause means that it has a subject and a verb. So if you look at this sentence, the subject would be my ice cream. That's what we're talking about. And then the verb would be fell. And when you're working on the worksheet that I gave you today, it asks you to underline the predicate. The predicate is just whatever comes after the subject, so it's the verb and everything that comes after that. So fell on the ground would be considered the predicate. So a simple sentence is called a simple sentence because it's simple. It's just one complete thought that's being expressed, and you can also call it an independent clause. All right, guys, the second type of sentence we're going to talk about is the compound sentence. So I like to understand compound sentences the same way that I understand compound words. So a compound word is one big word that is made up of two smaller words, and you probably learned about this in elementary school. So an example would be snowman, ice cream, football. So if you break football down, it's foot and ball combined into one new word. A compound sentence is basically the same thing. It's two simple sentences that are combined to create one new sentence. So I'm going to write that down for you guys. So when I say fanboy, I'm not talking about someone who goes nuts because they are meeting a celebrity. Fanboy is basically a cute little acronym that a lot of teachers use to help you guys remember the conjunctions. So it's two simple sentences that are combined with a comma and a conjunction. So F stands for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So it's basically two simple sentences combined with a comma and a conjunction. Also, instead of using a comma and a conjunction, a semicolon could be used. So either of those. Two simple sentences, you could also call that two independent clauses joined together by a comma and a fanboy. So I'm going to give you guys an example. All right, so the example that I wrote down on the board is, I dropped my ice cream, comma, I put a space right here, I began to cry. So if you look at the fanboys, we're trying to find a conjunction that is the perfect one that shows a cause and effect relationship. So what do you think would go right here? I dropped my ice cream, blank, I began to cry. If you said so would be the correct conjunction to put right there. I dropped my ice cream, so I began to cry. So if you look at this entire thing, you'll see one independent clause right here, and you'll see another independent clause right here. So it's the joining of two independent clauses or two simple sentences with a comma and a conjunction. All right, guys, the next type of sentence is the complex sentence. The complex sentence is comprised or made up of an independent clause being joined together with a dependent clause. And I'll give you guys an example. Since my ice cream fell on the ground, I began to cry. So if you look at this example that I wrote on the board, you should see a dependent clause being joined together with an independent clause. So remember, independent means that it can stand by itself. I could take it out of this sentence and it would express a complete thought. Dependent means that if I took it out, it would not express a complete thought. So the dependent clause would be this first part right here. Since my ice cream fell on the ground. So if I came up to you and I said, since my ice cream fell on the ground, and I said nothing else after that, you would be confused because you would think, since my ice cream fell on the ground, what? Did you cry? Were you upset? But I don't say anything else. So that would be considered a dependent clause. Independent means that it could stand by itself and express a complete thought. So I began to cry would be considered independent. I could say that to you and it would express a complete thought. So dependent joining together with independent is a complex sentence. The last type of sentence I'm going to talk about is the compound complex sentence. So it just sounds complex, it sounds extra because it is. It's probably the longest type of sentence you'll ever see, and it's a combination of at least 2 independent clauses with at least 1 dependent clause. I also like to think of it of a compound sentence combined with a dependent clause. So I'll write that down for you guys. So 2 independent clauses plus 1 dependent clause at least. So you can have more than 2 and more than 1. But I'll give you guys an example. All right, so here is my example in all its glory. And as I explained from the beginning, compound complex sentences are the longest sentences you will ever see. So it's a combination of at least 2 independent clauses with at least 1 dependent clause. So if you look at this sentence, you should see at least 1 dependent clause, meaning that if I took it out, it could not stand by itself and express a complete thought. So my dependent clause would be right here. After my ice cream fell on the ground. And that's considered dependent because if I came up to you and said, after my ice cream fell on the ground and said nothing else after that, you would wonder, after it fell, what did you do? So it has to be combined with something else in order to express a complete thought and not leave you with any questions. So after you point out that dependent clause, the rest of that would be your compound. So that's where the compound comes in. I began to cry, so my mom bought me another one. We see our comma, we see our fanboy, and we see that 2 independent clauses or 2 simple sentences are being joined together. I began to cry. That's independent. We have our comma and our conjunction, and then my mom bought me another one. That would also be independent. So as you can see, you have this compound sentence combined with a dependent clause, and that's why it's called compound complex. So that's the last type of sentence I'm going to discuss with you guys. I hope this made sense. As I said before, this is a review of a lot of things that we've been talking about, but I just wanted to make this to help you guys out a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or send me a message, and I'll do everything that I can to help you out. Have a good day.